Can you hear me on the audio? Okay, I'm getting nods from our other folks that they can hear me. Can you hear me on the?
Meeting room.
No, can everyone else hear the feed from the legislature? No, everybody's shaking their head. They can't hear. Okay. But we're not hearing anything from y'all.
Can you hear us? Mr. Claiborne, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I can now. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sorry for those technical difficulties. It's going to happen though when you're dealing with people that's not face to face. So I have introduced you, and if you would please tell us what some of the problems were that your nonprofits faced during the COVID pandemic.
Okay. I have two colleagues with me, and Jane Alexander with the Community Foundation for Mississippi in Jackson, and Roger Wilder, who's with the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. And if it's okay, we're going to let Jane lead off, and then I was going to go second, and then Roger would back clean up if that's okay with y'all.
That will be fine, Ms. Alexander. We look forward to your testimony.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate being invited to speak with you today about the needs of nonprofits as we have experienced them as both community foundations that do a great deal of granting on a regular basis, but also as our experience through the CARES Act funding that was directed towards nonprofits and food pantries. And I don't think it would come as any surprise to any of you sitting in this room that we uncovered a great deal of need on the nonprofit sector, and particularly with those groups that were providing food pantry services during the pandemic. We've always known that there was sort of an infrastructure problem and an infrastructure gap in the nonprofit sector, and we've all experienced that now firsthand. I think that the only surprise to us was that the need was even deeper than we anticipated. And that's everything from having reliable broadband access so that people can file applications online and upload documents online. It just seems like such a simple thing that most of us take for granted. But that's a very real need, particularly in our rural areas. I think the other thing that we've learned is most people who get into the nonprofit world are there because they have a passion for what they do. And we all so love that passion. We're so dependent on that passion to provide services to Mississippi's neediest communities, but they also might not have formal training and support for the work that it takes to actually run nonprofit organizations. And so I think that we have seen a need both from the investment in technology, infrastructure, that kind of thing, but also the need to invest in training, just like we would train people to build cars or train people to, make widgets, whatever those widgets are in the nonprofit sector. Helping people to get better at running their businesses is a really important thing. Again, we as community foundations do granting on all levels. We grant to large organizations, we grant to small organizations, and in this experiment, we have granted to charitable entities that may or may not be 501c3s, but they were patched together to provide food to folks who were going hungry during the pandemic for lack of access. Some of those may continue to band together to do this in their communities. Some may become formal nonprofits, and some may evaporate once this immediate need is well, maybe it'll be done. But I think that's the main takeaways from us is access to technology, access to training, and really investing in the infrastructure that is the nonprofit sector. It's hard to think about these individual nonprofits as a sector, but the Alliance did a study a couple of years ago that showed that more than 4,000 people are employed because of the nonprofit community in Mississippi. There's a $1.7 multiplier effect on dollars that are spent to support charitable endeavor. There's an average return on investment of around $8 per dollar invested in the nonprofit sector. So if you can start to think about nonprofits and grant makers together as an entire business sector, it starts to make more sense not to approach this as a matter of how to address just the need that nonprofits have for money, but really as a critical player in the economy of Mississippi. Because when you start to think about our grant making supporting almost 40%, it goes towards education. About 30% goes to public health and health causes. So as those things are stressed in small communities and rural communities in particular, we have the knowledge that the great burden for those services would fall probably back on the state or local entities to try to provide. So those are the sorts of big needs that we see that could be addressed by ARPA funding, and making sure that the nonprofit sector is included along with small businesses and large businesses and education sector. We just want to make sure that this sector can continue to thrive and grow and take advantage of this sort of once in a lifetime opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Wilder was going to be next.
Mike Claiborne with the Create Foundation. Just a quick word. We cover 17 counties in Northeast Mississippi, and for the purposes of the CARES Act, we covered 21 counties. All the community foundations split all the counties up in the state, so every county would be covered. What we found is that, as Jane mentioned, there's really a low level of sophistication, particularly at the much smaller food pantry level in particular. And so we had used United Way's, 6 of which are in our area, to help us get the word out to organizations that there could be funding available. What we have seen in terms of needs of nonprofits and food pantries is their income certainly was significantly affected by the inability to have the typical fundraisers that they had, the events that they typically do to raise money to support their efforts. And so we saw that as an impact. The other thing is many of the organizations, especially food pantries, depend on older adults to help with their volunteer needs to distribute food, and that was cut back in a significant way. So that put a crunch on their efforts. One of the other things that I think was a challenge, especially related to food pantries, is kind of a moving target of what was available from federal sources. I know the first round of our effort, we had a difficult time getting food pantries to even apply because they weren't having to pay for food at the time. Their largest source typically is through the food banks. The one that serves our area is in the Memphis area. I think there's one in Jackson. And so they weren't paying for food, so they didn't really have as much of a need. And so I'll just echo what Jane said too, about what nonprofits and food pantries need, we found that their organizational capacity was pretty limited, and the sophistication of how they operate is pretty limited. So I think one of the lessons there would be they need more support in terms of their ability to do the work that they do. And as we found in a painful way, the record keeping that they have is very limited. And so I would just say, those are some of the issues that we saw. There's no question that there's a need across the state. And again, as Jane mentioned, these are the people that are at the very basic level of meeting needs. And these organizations, nonprofits and food pantries across the state, they're in the best position to deliver services and support to our fellow Mississippians who need help. And so I think it is a very important thing to do. And I'll just pivot here for a minute and say that the challenge I think that we have all felt in working through Mississippi Cares is I think the intention of this program was to very quickly get funds out to organizations that needed help. The intention was for it to be very simple and uncomplicated and unbureaucratic. And we knew that there had to be certain protocols and procedures in place to account for the funds. And what we have experienced through this is, well, I'll put it nicely, a very challenging situation. I know the legislation on these funds changed a few times because you learn things as we learned that it needed to be done in a different way and maybe with some higher limits. But as we have moved through the program, we have had a very difficult time trying to respond to the regulations that were provided to us through MDA. And it is something to this point where, we were told on the front end that there would be some accounting help to assist us to, be sure we were approaching things in the right way. And all of us have done our best to do that. But Roger can speak more to this in a better way than I can, but it has been a very frustrating experience for us as we took the responsibility to distribute this $8 million across the state. We did so upon request and with really almost no administrative funding to cover our costs, which is fine. We want to play a role. At the same time, it has far exceeded what we anticipated in terms of time involved, and really the idea that this was a simple, quick way to get money to people who need it has turned in to be anything but that. And so I think as you look at distributing funds, that has to be a very significant piece of the conversation because it's not working the way it I think was intended. And we're spending a great amount of time trying to determine whether toilet paper can be reimbursed for a small church. And that's just a minor example of the kind of thing that we're dealing with. And so I would just final thing I'd say is as you're looking at future programs, there has to be a better way to streamline and to be clear what the guidelines are in terms of distributing the money. So I'll turn it over to Roger Wilder to finish up with for us.
I don't know that I can offer a lot more specific information. The Gulf Coast Community Foundation serves normally the 6 lower counties. In this for the CARES grants, we served an additional up in Greene County. The problems that we run into are, Jane and Mike have described them. We had an additional challenge as a part of this because during the COVID pandemic, we had 2 hurricanes, and so the COVID not only created its own problems, but it created problems in our hurricane recovery after Zeta. We distributed about $700,000 of our own money and the money of the United Way down here to help people recover from the hurricane damage. And lo and behold, we barely gotten over that one when we had Ida. So the challenges to our nonprofits down here have been operational, as both Jane and Mike have said. How we respond to that, I don't know. When this program was designed, it was designed as we understood it and as we have interpreted it, and I think MDA interpreted it, to cover as many food pantries, nonprofits, and organizations as we could who were doing good things to help people affected by the COVID. That was a great aspiration. We frequently talk about the little church on the hill, who you know, you're all familiar with small churches. We're all from Mississippi, and you know, they do what they do because they have a passion for it, and they don't keep up with all of they get a receipt from Walmart, and that's the only receipt they got. What we are being confronted with now is after the fact, and this is a reimbursement grant. Remember, that means that church on that hill had to spend the money before they could even ask us to give it, to reimburse them. They had already completed the transaction, except for submitting it to us. And what we have run into here is the classic conflict between nonprofits and governmental organizations. And somewhat in defense of everybody, this came on us all very quickly, and we had to respond quickly. The legislature passed the act session before last. We had to, at that time, it only extended through, what was it, 2020. So we had to get it out in a hurry. And unfortunately, it just seems that that's difficult to do with any sort of federal or state grant. I on behalf of my board, I have to say that before we would go into another program like this, where we are now looking at substantial risk if our grantees don't document $3.34 $0.04, which is an audit finding, that we're going to be very reluctant to get back in it. This is not the first one we've done. We did one after Katrina, and it turned out okay, but we spent 60% of the money not on direct services. We spent it on complying with HUD requirements and MDA requirements and this requirement and that requirement, and determining whether there was an aquifer under property that everybody knows there's no aquifer under. So I know I'm complaining a little bit. We are proud of the money we got out, and we believe that the legislature has gotten the result that they wanted, and we've gotten the money out to the people you wanted it to go to. If you are inclined to do this again, and I would, echo what Jane and Mike have both said, there is still a need. These organizations are trying to recover from COVID and get back on their feet. Now, a lot of those needs are in areas like child welfare and homelessness and medication and those areas. But the COVID affected them, and they are trying to recover, and their funding is slow returning. So I guess what we would say is, if you want us involved in the future, let's talk in advance and decide what the rules are going to be to the extent we can. We knew this was a federal program. We knew it was being administered by a state agency. But it just seems to be at cross purposes with its intent.
All right, thank y'all very much. I believe Senator Butler has something to say.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to echo to the individuals that have spoken in reference to the community foundation and nonprofits. We want to commend you for what you have done. And we can acknowledge that a lot of these things we couldn't have resolved had it not been for organizations like yours stepping up to the plate. However, one of the things that Ms. Jane brought to our attention, we are looking seriously at that, and the three of you, but we still need more focus on, we still need the nonprofits focusing on more of their needs of those communities, especially now that we've gotten to this point, and we want to try to provide the service for the least of those. And we know that with you working as you're working now, that you can help us out tremendously. So I just wanted to express that to you all and let you know how much we appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Butler. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you all for being here on Zoom with us today. I think you've given us some good advice and some things to watch for. And we will be meeting further to decide exactly which road we'll recommend for everyone to go down. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, next on the agenda is a Mississippi Department of Health. And I saw Dr. Dobbs a moment ago, but I believe maybe he stepped out. You're a busy man and we understand that. Thank you for being here. If you would, speak into the microphone, get up a little higher. We're having trouble with our audio system today, and we're having difficulty hearing people.
Is it on? It's not on. That would make a difference. Okay. Hey, thank y'all for having me. Good morning. So I handed out sort of a summary of the different sort of infrastructure needs we have. Now keep in mind, y'all asked me how much we needed, not how much we expected. So this is an accounting of the different sort of issues that we have, and I'll go over some in a little bit. Let's see. So one of the things I think it's very important is to keep in mind the footprint the health department has locally within each county. And you know, we have actually 92 health departments within 80 of Mississippi's 82 counties, in addition to other sort of buildings we have in Jackson, including like our public health lab, our Osborne building, our Underwood building, and the public health pharmacy. So we have a lot of building infrastructure. But for the counties, they have a really unique role in that they bring health to the community where your constituents are. And they do a lot of things. Obviously, vaccinations is something we know that they do now. Also, they do reproductive health service for free. So it's about the only place you can reliably get no-cost reproductive health services: birth control, pap smears, STD treatment diagnosis, cancer detection, breast cancer, cervical cancer prevention and detection. Also nutritional health services, breastfeeding, women, infant, children, nutritional program, and then other various and sundry different things. So they really have a unique niche within the counties. Let's see. There we go. And these are just some pictures of kind of how we were able to use our county health departments. They were really an invaluable footprint for how we approached the pandemic. And you can see some of the pictures on the left specifically, and in the top right of, you know, we converted a lot of these into drive-through testing centers. And then when we had to give vaccines, you know, we did drive-through vaccination centers. I do want you to note that, see the use of the iPads, we were able to invest using, you know, federal funding into an all electronic infrastructure. We were able to like check people in without a piece of paper. We had it connected to the central, you know, the central system so that we could make sure that we had all we had, and it really made things a lot more efficient. Now, I would like to propose that if we can get to these same set of systems for the rest of the operation, that we can continue to be more efficient. I think that we've, you know, demonstrated and understand that when we have the proper mission focus and attention to systems of efficiency, we can actually make things work quite well. So I'll talk about a couple of those sorts of things. Let's see. There we go. You know, we do have a necessity to have public health, and for decades, public health infrastructure, public health staffing has been underinvested. And I think that as a nation, we're starting to realize that. Those of us who worked in it for years knew it very well that we were underinvested, because when the Affordable Care Act and other things came up, a whole bunch of money got pumped into the healthcare system. And initially, there was supposed to be a lot of money invested in the public health system in parallel, but that got swept aside and not given. And all the money that went into the healthcare system basically bypassed public health. So while we were growing healthcare, we neglected public health. But you can see that there's certain roles that we have in the community, not only those health services that we provide in the counties, but, you know, when we have a public health emergency, we need to have those resources on the ground or we can't respond. And that includes pandemic response, you know, like we had, but also, you know, we have other things. We have TB outbreaks, we have Hep A outbreaks, we have GI outbreaks, we have syphilis outbreaks. These are things that we see all the time. This is just normal public health work. And we don't have that presence and that staffing and the infrastructure. We can't really respond properly, but also disaster response. Like if there's something happens on the coast or we have flooding or whatever, we set up operations to kind of do public services, tetanus shots and all that sort of thing. And kind of as a demonstration, if you look at the Mississippi Department of Health vaccination clinics, For a while, we were the only game in town. And if you look, especially if you looked within like the first year, the majority of shots were given through public health clinics because that was the place we could get them out reliably and fast. So we need to have that footprint. So this is just an overview of some of the county health departments. County health departments are, by statute, every county needs to supply a building and some basic support for like maintenance and utilities and that sort of thing. In reality, it's highly variable. Some counties are very good in their support and some are not so good. And some give actually zero in financial support for different counties. And if y'all want to know who those are, I'll give you a list after we're done. But they're county owned and county supported buildings, all the county health departments. They're primarily older buildings. These are like, built back in the 50s or, sometimes older. Although we do have some nicer buildings. Harrison County is a very nice example of a new health department. Some of the coast ones are nice, but a lot of them are a lot older. But they also need renovation on infrastructure. IT, broadband, phone systems. A lot of our county health departments are still operating on copper wires to transmit data. And one of the things we find is a real impediment is when we're trying to do not only our normal day-to-day work, but also for our emergency responses, we don't have the broadband capabilities to do modern data transfer. And that's a real challenge. And in many counties, it's a singular point of access for certain health services, particularly reproductive health and that sort of thing. And these are just a picture of some of our county health departments. Now that's not bad, but you can see that there's just kind of old and dingy, and they're just got like basically little minimal chairs. This is where sometimes people get their health care. And just think about when you look at these buildings, is this where you would want to go? And is this where you would want to take your family for healthcare services? So this is one of our doors at one of the county health departments. Obviously in need of a little bit of an update. This is some of the floors that need to be repaired. We have a lot of them with roof problems and leaking, a common issue. Let's see, this is the bathrooms from some of our county health departments. So just imagine that's your doctor's office. Would that make you feel comfortable to go back if you went to your doctor's office and you had to use a bathroom like that? Let's see. Again, roof issues, those are very common. Floor, but even like, it's cinder block walls. It's just really sort of retro old kind of stuff. And then, did I miss my? All right, gotcha. And so we have identified certain infrastructure needs for county health departments to update the different buildings, and this is on your handouts, to basically come in compliance with ADA. We've identified about $15.2 million. Now this is for this is almost 100 buildings, right? So it seems like it's a lot of money. We're talking about a lot of buildings. Patient privacy protections, about $8.7 billion. Defibrillators for patient safety, 65,000. Generators are absolutely necessary to keep the vaccines from going out of temperature. If they go out of temperature range, we have to throw them away. And think about how that was important back with COVID. Fortunately, we didn't have to dispose of any COVID vaccine, but you heard of different places around the country, they had to throw some away, and what a scandal it was. Fire safety, sprinklers, furniture, about 650,000, medical equipment. One of the biggest ones is just general building repairs. Some of the parking lots are pretty horrible. We have one that's all gravel, and then if y'all have ever been to Pike County, you'll know kind of how bad they can get. We did put in for some new Department of Health buildings, if that's something you're interested in. We do have a couple of counties that are just really beyond repair and probably need to be fully redone, and I'll show you some pictures. But also, we do have district buildings where we have administrative staff that cover about a 9 or 10 county range. Oh yeah, no, that's good. Yes, sir. We currently lease. But if we wanted to get a building and then do away with the considerable lease payments, that might be an investment if the Senate's interested in that. And this is kind of one of our buildings. Some of them are in such bad shape that they're really almost unsafe to inhabit. This is a crack in the wall where actually you can stick your hand through the wall and you can feel the outside air. It's pretty bad. You can see that the walls are coming apart. Severe ceiling issues. this is mold growing on the door in one of the clinic rooms. And every week they scrub it down with bleach and it keeps coming back because of moisture issues. And this is a snake that came in through one of the cracks in the wall to pay us a visit. So this is one of the county health departments that really needs to be updated. The scariest thing about the snake is they lost him and they couldn't find him again. So they didn't know where he was. Fax machines, believe it or not, we still use a lot of fax machines. Now, that's not just a problem of us, but our infrastructure in our communications with docs and hospitals, a lot of it's still antiquated. So when I talked to some of our federal colleagues in Congress, and they learned that we're using a lot of fax machines for COVID reporting, they were absolutely appalled. So we need some IT modernization for sure. We do need some IT infrastructure support, computers and equipment, about 4 million, phone systems and core IT connectivity, absolutely necessary. These are investments that are going to happen for us to maintain, basically modern capabilities. Central campus, like the buildings we have here, there's quite a few issues, things that we need to consider. We have some, well, that first number is not a real number. Sorry, I think I put an extra 3 in there by mistake. We have elevators need to be repaired, just normal stuff. New roof, chillers are out. They're old and dysfunctional. We put in some replacement for vehicles that are, past life cycle. We did put in for a few passenger vehicles if you guys were interested. We do spend a lot of money on travel. We actually would save considerable amount of money. The cars that you can get on contract, the contracts are fantastic, are relatively inexpensive, but we spend a phenomenal amount of money on our rental fleet that we have to pay over and over again. So it actually would be a money saver. We have severe leaking issues in our main central office. And then we have to, there's the public health lab, which has been a little bit of a challenge with the initial construction. We have significant repairs need for that. We also need a new pharmacy building, but, we can, right now we currently own the building, but it's really not in any state of reasonable use. And then for emergency response, we would very much benefit from additional warehouse capabilities. We have a space that we're leasing out. It's leasing that we're doing, right? We don't own it, out at the airport. It's overflowing and it's full of a lot of medical countermeasures and equipment, trucks and that sort of thing. It's really wholly insufficient, but we are leasing it right now and really need about 92,000 square feet, and absolutely need to repair and replace the field hospital. We have 2 field hospitals. One of them is out of function, the one that we put in Louisville, I think. And so that needs to be upgraded and also would give us the capabilities for drive-through clinics and tents so that we could do that when those are needed. And then, so anyway, this is the total that we put together, about 107 million in infrastructure needs. The other thing that I was asked to do, and I'm not sure if y'all wanted me to present it here, but someone had asked me from the Senate side to collect from the different hospitals, different infrastructure projects that they might be in need of. And so I did query the hospitals across the state to ask them if there were things that were related to the COVID ARPA money that they could benefit from. And I got a list of about $93 million worth, 76 new ICU and step-down beds, 243 negative pressure or infection control beds, and then other sort of projects that would help with, infection control, airflow generators and that sort of thing. And I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dobbs. If we could stay just a moment on the hospital needs.
Yes, sir.
Does our health department have to approve any of the changes that the hospitals made in increasing the ICU beds, or was that a local decision?
Well, they decided to do it themselves when they did add those spaces. We do have a certificate of need that has to go through a review if it's above 3.5 million, I think. But we didn't have to do any CONs for any of the space so far. But if they did do over in statute, if it's over 3.5 million, we'll have to give it a certificate of need approval, but that hasn't been an issue.
And the numbers that you had on the screen there a moment ago, that is money already spent by the hospitals,
No,
Or is
sir.
that something they would like to spend?
Those are new projects. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we know what they spent during COVID to increase the ICU beds that they had? Is there a number floating out there?
I do not have that, but I know some have, and I can try to get that information.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Dobbs, for being here today. Just a couple of questions. This $107 million that you got, is all this qualified under the ARP funding?
We believe that it is based on our interpretation of the rules.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned broadband availability a moment ago. Do you know if in those areas where you lack broadband, is it the lack of service availability, or is it an internal wiring issue that prevents you from delivering?
I think it's really more of a department, it's like an internal issue, but sir, it's both? Okay, it's both. So I guess some of both.
Of all the facilities have one in the state, do we know how many do not have high speed available to them from the outside? Or what percentage roughly?
I think it's around 50%.
Half?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And would it be possible to get the numbers you just displayed on the hospital request?
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I'll make sure you get that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dobbs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, just one quick
Oh, yeah,
question, if you
no,
would. So I don't know that you have this information available today, but could you get it to us possibly in the future? And that is, how many patients are utilizing the facilities, the healthcare county facilities? Do you have the number of patients they see annually?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, we can, for this past year, it's pretty easy because we've been tracking it, their total hospital census. So is that good just for the past year?
Yeah, just the health departments, just those facilities that you oversight.
Oh, you mean just the county health departments? How many
Yes,
patients we saw?
just the county health
Oh,
departments.
yeah, absolutely.
And I'd like to see that for probably 2019 and then probably 2020.
Oh, very good. Yes, definitely
Okay.
get that.
All right, thank you.
Pleasure.
Any other questions? I do have another one to follow up on, Dr. Dobbs. You said by statute, counties have to provide health department facilities in each county.
Yes, sir.
By statute, and do they have to provide a better space than what we've seen pictures of? And if not, how do they get away with that? And then secondly, have you had any counties willing to spend any of their ARPA funds to improve their county health facilities?
Yes, sir. I think, and I don't know the statute specifically, but it's just pretty plain, we'll provide space and support. And I don't know, we can get you the exact wording for it, but there's variable support. Some of the counties have. Forest County especially has been really great about trying to help expand that space out. It's overextended. I mean, we're overusing the space and it's really old kind of, dingy building. So yes, some of the counties are, but we haven't heard from many of them yet. We're trying to inquire to see which ones would be willing to do some support for us.
Okay. Would that, I'm assuming since the state could spend ARPA funds on buildings to improve healthcare, I'm assuming that those same guidelines would fit the counties. And if they've not thought about improving their health facilities, it would certainly be something that would be allowed under the ARPA guidelines.
Yes, sir. That's our understanding, and our regional administrators who are over the operations are contacting all the counties to, see if they're willing to help invest.
Okay. Senator Parks.
I would, and I guess I would just like to comment on that. And the reason I'm asking for the patient volume into those clinics is because I'm very disturbed that counties haven't taken care of this issue. So I understand that you're telling us that you are asking them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't understand why we're not demanding that. They stood before us yesterday and told us they're having trouble spending their funding. So I guess I would like to have at some point, if you could give us feedback on those counties that were not interested in helping with their health department, that would be great as well.
Yeah, some have been absolutely great. It's just highly variable, kind of what their local interest is. And, but we can absolutely get that information.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Dobbs.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your time today. On the agenda now, we switch from healthcare to tourism, I believe. And we have somebody from God's country in Hattiesburg, Marlo Darcy, who is going to speak for the DMOs, I believe it's called.
This presentation, the larger slides would be better for them to be able to see. I don't know if that's possible.
This is how people hear.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Marlo, if you would tell them your title, what you do in Hattiesburg, and then that you're representing our district type tourism events.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Marlo Dorsey. I'm currently the Visit Hattiesburg Executive Director and CEO. So thank you, sir, for saying it's God's country. We had the state championship football games this weekend in the Rock, and we were able to have a lot of people from around the state visiting our city. So we were happy about that. That is certainly my day job, but I have the honor and privilege also of serving this year as the Mississippi Tourism Association president of the board. And also I'm serving as the Mississippi Destination Marketing Organization legislative chair. So I'm wearing a lot of hats and I'm really honored to work alongside many of my colleagues throughout the state in a year that we have just seen so many challenges from the pandemic. But I'd like to give a shout out to two of my colleagues here today. We've got Danielle Morgan. She's the executive director of the Mississippi Tourism Association, and Dr. Ricky Thigpen, who is the Visit Jackson CEO and president, also serves with me on the executive committee of both of those state organizations, Mr. Chairman. So thank you so much for having me. I think we're trying to see if we can change the slide deck to the larger one. Thank you so much, sir, for helping us try to get those slides up larger. I did send a few of them. There we go. There we go. Thank you so much. I have a few things that I would like to share with you today. And first of all, thank you again for inviting us to be able to give you an update on the tourism industry. There's three goals during my remarks today that I would like to share with you. One is some world-class results. Number two is specifically the ask that we have with the federal dollars through ARPA that have come down. And then third, be available to answer any questions that the committee might have today. And I can assure you that if we don't have the answers to provide to you today, we will do everything we can to provide those back to you in a timely manner. We have Mississippi's destination marketing organizations, and we're here to request strategic tourism investments to recover and grow Mississippi's fourth largest industry. So many people don't know what a destination marketing organization is. It is specially created, a special unit of government through local and private legislation. And they are publicly funded through special levies for hotel taxes or restaurant taxes. And so there's more than 24 of us throughout the state, and they range from all the way in Corinth, Christy Burns, Senator Potts, Christy Burns in Corinth, all the way down to Vicksburg. I know Chairman Hopson has a great relationship with Laura Beth Strickland in Vicksburg, as does the Lieutenant Governor. So there's 24 of us throughout the state. If you see the stars on here, you'll see where we're all strategically located. I certainly also want to thank Senator Lydia Chassenall in the Senate. She serves as the chair of tourism. She's really been instrumental in alongside working with us in a lot of things to move our industry forward. So that's our goal for today. I'd like to share with you the results of the first round of CARES Act funding. So back in 2020, we came before the legislature and we asked for the creation of the Mississippi Tourism Recovery Fund. And you believed in us then through House Bill 1790 and 1791. You allocated $13.5 million for the destination marketing organizations. decisions to strategically market their communities outside of the state to safely bring people back to the state of Mississippi. We all know that tourism was the hardest hit industry, whether you ask the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Tourism Economics, U.S. Travel Association, it was the hardest hit industry. So it comes full circle this morning to come right after Dr. Dobbs as he's talking about public health, because we poured our eyes on the screens looking at each and everything that he would say during the daily briefings to ensure that we were doing all the things necessary at the local level to be able to pivot and adapt to safely receive guests. So we were able to receive $13.5 million. Our funding was administered through the Department of Finance and Administration. Liz Welch and her team did a tremendous job for us. We had to submit monthly reports with our marketing plans, all of our analytics, so on and so forth. Let's fast forward to what happened a few months after all of these dollars were infused in the economy. So we all use the Visit MS Responsibly hashtag in all of our marketing that we did. That was a stipulation and what we needed to do to make sure that we were all very connected in our message. While we might be marketing the Hattiesburg Zoo or our public art or the Longleaf Trace in Hattiesburg, Jackson may be marketing their museums, Ridgeland may be marketing outdoor recreation. While we all marketed our own products, we all use that hashtag Visit MS Responsibly. And it had well over 250 million impressions throughout the United States. And the end of December, we finished #1 in the country. Mississippi finished #1 in the country in December of 2020. So if you take a look at your handout and you can see here on the map, we were down 19% year over year, which is significant. If I've got to take a budget cut in my household of 19%, some things certainly have to change for me. But we were down 19%. But if you look at the contiguous states around us, Louisiana was down 39%. Alabama down 30, Florida down 43, and so on and so forth. So these dollars certainly provided a tremendous yield and return on investment for us, not only at the local level, but also at the state level. Where were people coming from? Where were we receiving the visitors in our communities? If you look at the top 10 out-of-state markets, you'll see on the left bottom of the screen, you'll see Birmingham, Mobile, Jackson, Tennessee, Dallas, Little Rock, Nashville, Baton Rouge, Atlanta, Houston, and Memphis. So we've had to become a lot more sophisticated in how we do our jobs, and we really rely a lot on big data. It allows us to really be nimble, take a look at what's working in various target markets, and really ensure that we are utilizing the money that we have to best get that return on investment. So this slide that you see here, and if it's a little hard to see in your handout on the next page, I apologize for that. But recovery for us has certainly been a very bumpy and volatile road. Since the pandemic began 19 months ago, the state of Mississippi lost $2.6 billion in visitor spending. So what does that mean for the people in this building? That's not including all of our hotels, restaurants, small businesses, main streets. What does that mean for tax dollars? That means we lost $107 million in state tax and $32 million in local tax. And these things, we all had to tighten our belts at a time when we just really did not know what the future was going to hold for the tourism industry. So if you take a look at this graph, this illustrates Mississippi's monthly travel spending and the changes from 2019. So our worst month, of course, was April of 2020, when we all had to hover inside our homes and take 2 weeks to slow the spread. Boy, don't we wish that's all that we had to do. But we had a negative 72% visitor spending loss in that first month coming out of in the pandemic. If you fast forward all the way to September of this year, so September of 2021, we were up 24% from September of 2019. So let me repeat that. Pre-pandemic, September of 2019, 2 years later, September of 2021, we were up 24% year over year. So what does that mean? How does that look in comparison to the rest of the country? Where does that put Mississippi? So we're up 24% in the month of September. The rest of the country, the national average, they're down 9%. Number one in the country again. And for us, you know, we've got to sit back and just really let that sink in for a minute, because the CARES Act dollars, the leveraging we're doing at the local level with our funds that we receive through special levy taxes, the dedicated funding that Visit Mississippi has, leveraging all of those assets together has really worked for us. So in September of 2021, now mind you, we had a lot of hurricane evacuees from Hurricane Ida in that month too. But visitors spent $1 billion in the state of Mississippi in September of 2021. Just feels pretty good to, with all the struggles and everything that all of our communities, all of our main streets and small businesses have gone through, feels really good to be able to say that and share that. But where do we go from here? We know that we need to manage expectations. We know that there's a lot on the horizon. We have the Omicron variant that we don't know what the future is going to hold for it. We also know that there are rising costs right now. We have inflation to deal with. We also have gasoline at the pump is not what it used to be. And so we have a lot of issues that we really are looking at to really try to fortify the state's position to continue this momentum. So where do we go? We have a once in a lifetime opportunity right now to really change the trajectory of what tourism growth has been in the state of Mississippi. So if you take a look at this slide here, and again, it's also on your handout, it'll take you all the way back to FY of 2015 and annualize our tourism growth through FY 2033. So typically, tourism grows about 3% annually for the state of Mississippi. But right now we're at an inflection point. We've heard Governor Reeves say that his goal is to have 30 million visitors in the state annually. Prior to COVID-19, we had about 25 million. We dropped off significantly in year one of the pandemic to 21 million. And we've done everything that we can with the funds you've provided to us, as well as leveraging our resources at the local level and those that Visit Mississippi through dedicated funding to maximize our recovery. But it's not enough if we stop now. So we're really at that inflection point in our state's history, that tipping point. How do we make smart and intentional decisions now so that we can look back at this time and say, that's what did it for us. That's how we were able to achieve that growth a lot faster than what we did. So take a look at the red part that's on this slide. And if we continue down our current trends with the amount of funding and growth that we have, we can actually achieve that 30 million visitor goal 6 to 7 years sooner than if we did not invest very strategically and diligently in tourism. Another thing, Chairman Polk, that I know resonates very near and dear to you with accountability, transparency, and efficiency. Return on investment is extremely important to us too. During the pandemic, we have had to answer at the local level, being boots on the ground to a lot of our businesses who have really struggled with a lot of things, and jobs have been extremely important. You know, we lost 25,000 or more jobs in the first few months of the pandemic for the state of Mississippi. For every $1 billion that visitors spend in the state, that equates to 12,500 jobs. So just think about the more visitors we have come to our state and the more dollars that they invest here, that equates to jobs for us. So again, we are not just the festival and fun people. While we all love a great party and we all love to welcome people into our communities and make them feel very at home as the hospitality state, tourism has become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more competitive. And so we're here to graciously request of the reauthorization of the Tourism Recovery Fund for a $52 million amount. And that's really the minimum that we believe that we need to be able to take us through tourism recovery through 2024, 2025. We believe that we need to capitalize on the momentum. Being number one in the country, not once, not twice, but 3 times feels really good. But rest assured, other states are looking at us. They're looking at our model. There is a lot of money in the market that they also have through ARPA funding. And you take a look at Louisiana, you take a look at what they've just done with their Louisiana Tourism Revival Program, $77.5 million that they've just put into that. There's a lot more competition that's out there too. We were all on board collectively at the local level with how the funding formula worked the first time for the distribution of funds. It was based upon our spends plus a percentage of visitors that we had for the top markets in the state. It worked very well for us, and we would just like for us to be able to have a reauthorization of that, just not over 6 to 8 months as it was in the first one, but more over 3 to 4 years for us to be able to do it. So it's really easy to do the math to see how we came up with that number. You know, our leadership position really is in jeopardy. And while we can't give you a crystal ball and say, if you give X amount of dollars or invest X amount of dollars in ARPA funds, we can assure you that we will yield X. We can't say that because there's just so many factors that are out there. But what we do know is that if we don't invest in another round of tourism recovery, that we certainly will lose the competitive advantage that we have. So the current tourism environment that we see now, and we keep up with a lot of the national trends on consumer travel sentiment, there's a lot of pent up demand. We all know that. We know that people from a mental health perspective, they're tired of being cooped up inside. They really want to be able to get out and enjoy other parts of the country. So coastal and rural states will do better than those that don't have those assets. Coastal, rural, outdoor, that really puts Mississippi in a prime position for recovery. Additionally, what we are seeing is we're infusing all these dollars in the positive Mississippi messaging at the state level and at the local level. Collectively, we were able to spend more than $30 million in the last year to effectively market the state of Mississippi. That's positive messaging. That's changing the way a lot of people who've never been to Mississippi, how they see our state. And we continue to be able to yield great dividends from that. So, Mr. Chairman, that is the first phase of our request, and it's a proven model, and the $52 million, we've had handouts and things like that, and we respectfully submit that to you. The second thing we wanted to talk with you about today is something called destination development, and it is to drive growth for long-term recovery. So many of you might ask, what is destination development? So it's the strategic enhancement of the supply side of tourism by providing compelling experiences and quality infrastructure to entice new and repeat visitors. Many years ago, before I was in the position that I'm in now in Hattiesburg, I had the pleasure of working at the Mississippi Development Authority as the chief marketing officer there. And at the time, working on economic development and tourism marketing, we did a competitiveness study for tourism for the state of Mississippi. And what we found from that competitiveness study in 2013 was that while Mississippi has a wonderful product, it doesn't have the assets for tourism or attractions, infrastructure-wise, museum-wise, attraction-wise that many other states did. So if we look to where we are now, let's fast forward 8 years later, let's look at the beautiful 2 museums that we have in Jackson. Let's look at the Grammy Museum. Let's look at the aquarium that we have on the coast. Our Hattiesburg Zoo has just grown by leaps and bounds. We can look at many things in the northeast part of the state from Tupelo and Tunica. So our tourism product has grown. And that is a great thing for us because it allows us to keep people in the state longer than just 1 or 2 days. We can actually build itineraries for them and keep them here longer. So that's a good thing for us. So quality of place is also an economic driver. So when we look at 20th century economic development, we all know it was workforce. Let's get the manufacturing plant here. And that has worked very, very well. In the 21st century, and especially since the pandemic, a lot of things have really changed for that. People can work remotely. A lot of white collar jobs can work inside of the home, and quality of place is just a really important part of 21st century economic development. And so we believe that an investment in our communities, whether that's at the Main Street level, whether that's through outdoor recreation, whether that's in additional tourism attractions, we believe that that is an investment in our long-term recovery. So want to share with you a few of the statistics, again, on what that might mean. So long-term recovery for the state would allow us to create jobs and support local small businesses if we can enhance our quality of place. As you know, in the 2020 census, we're in a unique position. Mississippi was one of 3 states that lost population in the 2020 census. West Virginia, Mississippi, and Illinois were those 3 states. Now, while the end of the decade, we did a lot better of a job attracting and retaining talent than we did in the beginning, we know that we have to have that quality of place to be able to attract the right people for the right jobs and to get that private sector investment. We know we all love our community colleges and our university system. And once people get that credential or once they get that degree, we really need to make sure that we have the assets in the community to make them want to stay in our state. So it's an opportunity for us to, again, reverse the population decline. We believe, in closing, that now's the time for us to fortify our position. We need to invest in the continued success of this promising sector. We have a lot of collective ambition. The pandemic has taught us a lot of things. It's taught us that through adversity, we all need to work together and find new ways of marketing our communities and our state. And again, while we can't foresee the volatility of the travel market, we do stand united in the fact that we will work hard for our communities and we will do the things that it takes to help our destinations and our state to be successful. So we look forward to working with you, Chairman, and the rest of the committee on many of the things that you foresee and how you want to help move this state forward. We stand ready to answer any questions that you have as we look at what this ARPA funding request is and provide any additional guidance that you might need in making the decisions that you need to for the best benefit of our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorsey. Questions? Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for being here today. You mentioned a lot of the tourism assets that we've created over the last decade or so. Are there any assets that y'all are aware of in the state that maybe are underutilized that we could look at from a funding perspective with some of this ARP money?
That's a great question. Thank you, sir. I really do. When we look at our top leisure sectors in the state of Mississippi, we know gaming, of course, is our #1 leisure sector. So we know that has done very well rebounding from the pandemic and whatnot. So with the marketing and things that they're doing, those things seem to be going very well as long as we continue to advocate and market for it. Youth sports and outdoor recreation have been our saving grace throughout the pandemic. We have, families want to get out and travel. And Governor Reeves was very aggressive in making sure that we could have ways for youth sports to be able to compete. A lot of our youth sports facilities, sir, are not up to speed as compared in many other states. If you take a look at Alabama and Louisiana and Tennessee, they've invested a lot more dollars in many of those things than what we have. So #1, I would certainly say youth sports. #2, I would say our blueways and our greenways. We have the Longleaf Trace in Hattiesburg. I know the Natchez Trace, the Tanglewood Trail, all of these things are tremendous. I know Chairman Hopson is also an avid cyclist, and these things are really important for our state for numerous reasons. People who are fitness enthusiasts will travel all over the country to really enjoy the great outdoors. But what it also does for local quality of life and access to underserved populations is it gives them connectivity and a free way to be able to get out there and promote their own physical health. And we know that as a state, childhood obesity has certainly been something that, we really struggle with as a state, and providing more opportunity to greenways and blueways for our youth and really promoting that healthy lifestyle from the get-go gives us a quality of place, but also attracts more visitors.
Just another couple questions. You mentioned a proven ROI. Do you know what that is on the monies that have been spent?
Yes, sir. So it's different for all of our destinations, and we're required through our CARES Act funding, we have to provide a monthly report and turn that in to DFA. So for Hattiesburg, I actually have a lot of that printed out, and I was going to leave a copy with the chairman on it. So for Hattiesburg specifically, during the CARES Act, we received $499,856. And so with that, we know that we were able to turn that around nearly tenfold in what that ROI was for us, just in the market exposure that we received. But Hattiesburg is a $300 million a year tourism economy. And so just that funding coupled with our own local funding that we use to leverage that really helped propel us into a place where now we're 38% over in Hattiesburg where we were 2 years ago. But again, we know that we've got to manage that expectation because competition is ramping up. But yes, sir, each one is different. Collectively, we can crunch all those numbers though and provide what that looked like for you.
Sounds like it's pretty good though.
Yes, sir.
On the destination development project, you may have mentioned it, forgive me, is there an amount of money y'all are asking for that?
So when we originally took a look at this, and we've had great conversations with the Lieutenant Governor about this and many of our other officials, when we looked at this, originally the amount that we collectively pulled together for the entire state was $100 million. Now that's a scary number and it certainly sounds like a lot, but when we're talking about the entire state and we're talking about trying to work on projects that would be meaningful and really make a significant difference in that community, you're really going to need anywhere from potentially $2 to $3 million per project to be able to really enhance that outdoor, trail or that park or that soccer facility or in a downtown area for downtown revitalization. If that's a grant program that's competitive, that meets the ARPA guidelines through Treasury guidance, that's great. If that winds up being something that's vetted at the local level, I know each community and destination is diligently working on their priority list to see what those things needs to be. And if that's line itemed out in appropriations specifically and everything's vetted, that really isn't up to us. We just feel that it's important for us to present this as a tremendous need for two reasons. Number one, we are supposed to be the local expert on how to market our communities. So in Hattiesburg, I can provide to you all the good, but I can also talk about this gap that we might have, that if we invested a little bit more in X, then it would yield Y. And then number two, we want to make sure that everybody throughout the state is equal access to be able to receive some of these funds, because we're in a unique position in that we're one of 3 states that lost population. And if we want to fortify our position and attract and retain talent, people are going to want that great backdrop when they're not at work and enjoy those amenities and that quality of life. So that's a gap that we recognize that we wanted to present from a tourism and economic development standpoint, how that looks and who gets those fundings, whether that goes through, a municipality, whether that goes through your local Main Street program, your state Main Street program. So that's really not up to us. We look to your discretion for how that is. We're presenting the need.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Other questions? Senator Parks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for your presentation today. It's been excellent. But my question today centers around, you talked about outdoor activities, and we talk about what our community has to offer. But I guess I'm looking at too, we have some great state parks. And do you have any data that would support that any investment needs to be made there, that would create more tourism dollars or anything? If you could talk about that just a little bit, maybe.
Thank you so much for that question, Senator. So I have a list of what many other states are doing, and there's some great websites where you can just go in and pull how other states are spending their ARPA dollars in arts, culture, tourism, and outdoor recreation. So I know Parks is on the agenda to be able to speak, but my recollection is there's approximately $154 million in deferred maintenance for state parks. Number may be a little different. That's just the number that I remember hearing. People flocked to state parks during the pandemic. I mean, who doesn't want to be around a campfire with your family when you've been cooped up inside and everybody has cabin fever? We know that Mississippi has a beautiful landscape, and our outdoors, our rivers, our streams, our forests, our trees are beautiful. But we know that deferred maintenance of $150 million plus means that our amenities at our parks really do need to be modernized and brought up to speed to be more competitive with other places. So I believe an investment in our state parks to be able to bring, those accommodations up to speed would yield tremendous dividends. What that looks like, we will leave that to the experts. But I know for us, with Paul B. Johnson being just around the corner from our offices, a lot of people visit it and they really enjoy it. But being able to provide more modernized rustic facilities, I think would be certainly a feather in our cap, and we would market it tremendously to be able to get people here. And I believe that ROI would pay big dividends.
So you are investing in the advertisement of our state parks and those type things today, currently?
At the local level in Hattiesburg, we market we work directly with that. And then I also know that, so one thing is Mississippi Tourism Association Board of Directors serves as the advisory board for the Visit Mississippi dedicated funding. So we have local dollars that we spend at the local level, as you know, with Christy Burns and Visit Corinth. And then the state of Mississippi, through their dedicated funding model, they market the state, and they kind of serve as that umbrella organization. Well, we serve as the advisory board to those funds for the dedicated funding. And they are really doing a good job of trying to ramp up how they market our parks and a lot of our outdoor recreational amenities.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? You mentioned earlier your DMOs. How many do you say we have in Mississippi?
We have more than 24. 26 participated in the first round of CARES Act funding.
But there are more than 26.
At the time, through the peer report, when we really went in and looked at the legislation and how all of those things needed to be done when that program was first done, we pulled that directly from the peer report, and there were 26 that met the definition of a DMO. So since that time, if you take a look at Flowwood and the things that they have going on there, they're organizing, becoming that destination marketing organization too. And Ricky or Danielle might know of others specifically, but this model is certainly working and it's yielding big dividends. So there may be one or two more since we first started the first legislation, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to call a brief recess for about 3 to 5 minutes. And if would, the speakers for the wildlife and fisheries, if you would come see me, please. The presentation by the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Dr. Woodward is here to talk with us and to present us her request probably for what, $500,000? All right. Do we have any handouts? Okay, Dr. Wood, we're ready to hear from you. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Polk, and thank you all for having us here. Thank you for having me come down and have the opportunity to talk to you about what's happening at the medical center and some of the needs that we have that we feel like fit well with this ARPA funding that is available for the state. As I have thought about the things to share with you, I categorized them in my mind kind of in a timing standpoint, and I thought about the past, the present, and the future. So in that column of the past, what I would share with you is we at the medical center, the organization was established there in 1955. We've got a lot of 1955, 1960, 1970, 1980 buildings that we are maintaining, and a lot of infrastructure that is old and outdated and strained by the volumes that are on it now. Dr. Rankins last week presented as part of the IHL infrastructure information, some of the information that pertains to the medical center as well. And that relates to things like water wells, water towers, pipes, sewer, same thing, and even storm and stormwater control. We've got one of our buildings in particular that floods most of the time when it rains hard, and then some others that have some flooding with other rains. When you think about the water and the demands on the water there at the medical center, we are on our own well and our own system. So the campus proper is not on Jackson Water, but some of our facilities that are just right off the campus, the Batson Children's Clinic, the specialty clinic that's over by the stadium, the Medical Towers building that is by the stadium, and the Lakeland Medical Building on the north side of Lakeland Drive. Those are on Jackson Water. And when we have challenges with the Jackson Water system present difficulties in maintaining clinical operations, especially it's hard to take care of patients in settings where you don't have the water. So there are a number of needs that we have related to infrastructure, water, sewer, fire protection, storm drainage, et cetera. And like I said, Dr. Rankins presented much of that last week when he made his presentation. If you fast forward just a little bit to the present, if you ask the folks at the medical center today, what is our biggest challenge just right this minute today? And that has to do with staffing. And I think almost anybody from any health system hospital in Mississippi and across the country would tell you the same thing, that we've really got some challenges as it pertains to staffing. The thing that we talk about the most, and I think that you've heard the most about, is related to the nursing workforce. They are a large part of the patient care workforce, and we do have some serious challenges related to nursing staffing. But I would want to just make the point that there are other components of the workforce where we also have challenges. And for nursing, it's across the spectrum, whether it's our RNs or LPNs, but others like respiratory therapists. There is a challenge with the respiratory therapy workforce, just not having the volume that we need. Lab techs, it's really a long list if you look at where are the challenges. So that is our most pressing issue, just this minute today. At 7 this morning on our report, we had 33 admitted patients that we were holding in the emergency department that we couldn't get to beds. Those patients were admitted to the hospital, but being held down there. And that puts a real strain on the emergency department. In the last few days, we've had around 60 beds that have been closed. So they are beds that we have in the hospital, but they have been closed because of staffing shortages. So clearly, if we could open those beds, we would have additional beds for the patients that are being held in the emergency department, but also other patients around the state. And we've been in conversation with our colleagues, particularly at the other large health systems in Mississippi, and they're seeing the same thing, where they are short on nurses. Because they're short on nurses, they have beds that they cannot staff, and that is a challenge, you know, for all of us in Mississippi. So that is something that's a problem for us. And we've taken several steps of ways that we can push the buttons that we can control and perhaps make a difference with this. Just to give you a couple of examples, one of the things that we've done is we've got slots that are open for our nurses that perhaps don't typically work in the inpatient setting, because all of the information that I shared is about the inpatient nurses primarily. There are some challenges in other settings, but that's the most acute challenge. So we have opened up slots so that nurses who maybe work full-time in the clinics, but perhaps would like to work some extra shifts in the hospital, can do that. It takes a little bit of a matching game to be sure that the nurse that maybe works in a clinic that would be willing to help out in the hospital has the right background and experience to work in whatever particular unit. So it's a little bit of a matching game, but that has helped some. That's helped a little bit. Thinking about the future, we are offering to the students in our own nursing school tuition scholarships in exchange for a commitment to say that they will stay and work with us at the medical center. You know, again, that's one of the buttons that we felt like we could push, that we could have an impact. And that might be something where there's broader consideration at a state level, just like in the past, the state has supported tuition scholarships for medical students and dental students in return for an obligation to work in the state. And that may well be something that would be very well received in the nursing community and could make a difference as well for our nurses and for our nursing workforce. So that's something that we are working on. There is, this is a national challenge. We recognize that. That still doesn't make it any less painful for anybody that's experiencing it, but it's not a Mississippi problem. It's not a medical center problem. It's a national problem. And it will take lots of ideas to really address this. One of the things I will mention is that during the course of the pandemic, we have watched closely the applications to our professional schools because of the concern and the worry that many of us had that young people who are smart and motivated and bright and can do a lot of great things with their life might look at the stress and strain that has been put on the healthcare workforce these last couple of years and decide that that perhaps is not the right career for them, that they would rather do something else with their life. And one of the most encouraging data points throughout this pandemic has been that for our professional schools at the medical center, we have not seen our applications go down. In fact, we've seen the applications go up. In several schools, they had all-time records in the numbers of applicants. So that is encouraging. It's been good these last couple of years to be able to find a few bright spots, and that certainly has been one of the bright spots. So I believe that there's still a young, motivated, intelligent, energized, and energetic group of young people that are interested in healthcare and particularly interested in nursing, and that we will rebuild the workforce over time. But it's certainly, the pandemic we have taken a hit from the standpoint of the nursing workforce. So that's sort of the present state. To think about the future, there are some things that I would like to pose to you to consider for future growth and investment. While I'm on nurses, I'll talk about the nursing school. We've been working closely with the nursing school dean and with the team there. And as I said, the applications have grown. I think that there is an opportunity to grow enrollment in our nursing school. One of the assessments that we have done these last couple of years on the campus is looking at particularly the nursing and the dental school and their facilities. Both of those schools are in facilities that are outdated and undersized and not modern. They are not aligned with the modern day type curriculum for training nursing students and dental students. And so, you know, I would pose that an investment in facilities for nursing school and the growth of the nursing school would be a great investment for the state of Mississippi, and likewise for the dental school. Those are both schools where there is the potential for growth, and that would be supported by an applicant pool with new facilities. The School of Dentistry takes 40 students a year. They're all Mississippians. In the dental school, they take 20 students a year in the dental hygiene program. So those are the students that they have in that building. The dental school building was built in the 70s, and it is also a patient care space. So it's not just classrooms where the students come or labs where the students have their experience, but it's also patient care space. And it is not flexible. It is rigid and landlocked. So those are both things that for a future investment, I think would have good return for the citizens of Mississippi. The legislature supported an education building for the School of Medicine, and it has been fantastic. We've grown that class size. They are all Mississippians. We have a great retention rate in the state. And I think I've said before in a number of meetings on the medical center campus, you know, I'm not sure who'll be standing in my shoes in 20 years, but 20 years from now, the state of the workforce for physicians per capita in Mississippi will be different than it is right now. And that is because of the investment that's been made. In many cases, medical education is a long pipeline. For nurses, it is not as long as it is for medicine and dentistry. We've got an accelerated nursing program at the medical center and a branch of it also in Oxford. And those classes take students who already have a bachelor's degree and in a year prepare them to then go into the nursing workforce. That program was started with a small cohort with a little bit of uncertainty of what the demand would be like. And it has really turned out to be a program with high demand. And the students are a little bit older, they're a little bit more mature, and they hit the ground running. So that has been a really great program for us. And unlike medicine, dentistry, physical therapy, and some of the other programs that really do have a long runway, that is something that offers a quick return on investment or a quicker return on investment. So I think that is something that is worth considering. Another thing that I would like to put forward, in a review or just reading of the ARPA funds and the way that those funds can be used, there are mentions made about access and health outcomes. There seems to be some flexibility to focus on things that are related to healthcare and health outcomes and access. And one of the challenges that we have across the state in particular is related to adolescent psychiatry, adolescent mental health beds. There is a demand for those that is tough to meet. And so on the list that we would present to you would be a request to consider a build out of some of our current space in the original Children's Tower, a complete renovation and a build out of one of those floors to be able to open an adolescent inpatient psych unit. We have adult inpatient psychiatric units. We have a child inpatient psychiatric unit. But many times those adolescent patients fall in that gap between child and adult and are very difficult to place. We do have the professionals, the psychiatrists, who can cover that unit. So the workforce is already there. It's a matter of having beds that are dedicated to those patients on a dedicated unit, as opposed to trying to place them out amongst other patients and the other children in the hospital. And then the last thing that I would put forward for you to consider and to think about is a bigger picture idea. It's a very big ticket item. It is certainly something that I feel is very important to the state of Mississippi and could be one of those transformational type projects, and that is a cancer center. Mississippi has several small cancer centers, several very specific cancer centers, but we don't have a comprehensive cancer center that has got all the specialists and all of the programs that are needed for a comprehensive cancer center under one roof. For some years at the medical center, that has been something that we have considered and thought about and have tried to think through how we might be able over the next years to make that a reality. It is complicated, it's expensive, it's a big project, but I believe, just like we were committed some years ago, that the state of Mississippi really needed a premier children's hospital that all of the citizens of our state could view as the place for children to go. When your child needs a specialist that you can't find anywhere else, we can take care of that child in Mississippi. I feel very passionate that in the future, this is something also that Mississippi needs to really provide that range of spectrum, that range of healthcare services, the spectrum of those quaternary and tertiary cancer services, so that Mississippians don't have to leave the state to receive that kind of care. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions or elaborate further on any of these.
Question from the committee? Senator Parks.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Woodard. I wanted to go back to one of your first comments, which talked about the infrastructure sewer. Last week when we did hear from IHL, there was a list and there was a dollar figure associated with that. DFA also provided a list and a cost. I would like to put a challenge out to you and your group today to look at those two and maybe report back to us. If you could get that to Christy, if they are matching or they are different, and what your expectation is for that.
We'll be glad to. I have not seen the DFA list. We have seen the IHL list. I'm aware of that, and that does reflect, what we would like to have on that list, but we'll cross-reference that with the DFA list. Thank you. We'll be glad to do that.
That would be great. You mentioned several things. You mentioned, the commitment to nursing community and the students potentially, signing something to stay with the state, but you didn't give any dollar figures associated with that. Is that something you're going to provide later, or is that just a suggestion?
So, what I can tell you now with concrete information is what we have done is our own internal investment for around 250 students is about $5 million. Now, in most cases, these are programs where the scholarship is being offered, but we haven't hit the deadline. So that would be the cost to us if about 90% of the students we extend this scholarship to accept it. We don't know yet. It'll be probably the end of January, maybe into February before we know how many of them take us up on it. So we don't know that yet, but we did, kind of look at, okay, the current enrolled students that we have that are about to graduate in the next 12 months. So we didn't look at the ones that have just started, but the ones that are about to graduate in the next 12 months, we're going to offer this scholarship to them. And if they all took it, this is what it would cost us. So looking out, thinking about that and extrapolating that to perhaps, across the state to all the nursing schools at the state level, I can do some math that would be similar to what we've done, but I think we've got the options of deciding, would we want to ask them to commit for a year and perhaps either have a semester or a year's worth of scholarship money equal a year's worth of commitment? Or would we want to do, 3 semesters, a year and a half to equal 2 or 3 years? So there's a lot of way it can be looked at. I do think that we know that just based on the responses that we've gotten, while I don't have a final count and won't have that for another month or so, there's a high level of interest. And my expectation would be that if this was extended more broadly across the state, there would be a lot of students in Mississippi at nursing schools all across the state that would be interested in this.
And I appreciate that. And the reason I asked that question, because from almost every group, whether it be IHL or community colleges or some of the other organizations, they all had a number. Some of those numbers were quite significant that they were looking for some of those programs to expand those programs. So I was just curious if you had a dollar figure associated with that at this time. So that's it. Thank you so much.
We do have preliminary numbers that tie to all the items I mentioned, and we'll put that on one sheet and get that back to the committee for your consideration.
Thank you.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. You mentioned something earlier that was intriguing. You said the bright spot is enrollment is up. Have you had any indicators as to explain why that's up?
So, I was worried that the young people would see the stress and, the pictures. We've seen all the pictures on social media with the bruises and from the mask and just the trauma that the healthcare workforce has seen. I was worried that that would have the effect of them thinking this is not a good time to go into healthcare. But I've been so pleased to see that applicants have gone up. And I think it is because they see a need. And despite the fact that, that I and other people sometimes disparage young people, I think that they see that there's a need and that there's certainly a career where they would have some job opportunities and job securities. And they have, shown interest in it. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Senator Michel.
Dr. Woodward, under the heading of ballpark figures on the supplements for the workers, we know it's a lot more than just nurses. Do you have a ballpark figure on what type of annuity would be necessary to try to help those critical workers and keep them on the job?
So that's a hard question to answer. That is a very hard question to answer. I've heard people talking about numbers like 5,000 per nurse, 10,000 per nurse, 20,000 per nurse. It is a balance between what we can afford, I think, as a state, and what is an adequate amount that would make them feel valued, because for the ones that have been there and who have stayed on the job and have worked through it now for almost 2 years, you get to the point where you give them a smaller amount. And I think that doesn't feel like it's a value for what they've done. And honestly, I think as a state and as a country, we can't afford. There is almost no way to put a value on the dedication. So is there a number that I would recommend? I cannot pin down a number. That's a very hard question. I'd love for it to be as high as it can be, but I know that there are a lot of needs. They have just done amazing work.
How many people do you think we're talking about when you take into consideration the techs, like you mentioned, the nurses, respiratory therapists? Are we talking 2,000 workers at University Hospital, 4,000?
So we have about 3,000 nurses. Now that includes some of the ones that are in the clinics and other things that have not necessarily borne the brunt of the bedside COVID patients. But if you look at the nurses, if you look at the respiratory therapist, if you look at kind of the team as a whole, the lab techs, et cetera, it would be in the 3,000, maybe 4,000 number. It just depends on how broad you expand that net. One group, just to give you an example that I would kind of just shed a little light on the lab techs, the folks that run the lab. They rarely actually go have any patient interaction. They are in the lab. But during that time, while we were working to develop a test and we were working with the Department of Health and receiving samples from all over the state and basically went to a 24/7 operation and ramped up tremendously, there really was no option except to meet that need. So I would say that group of individuals has been just as stressed and strained as the respiratory therapist and some of the nurses, yet they have not seen a patient. So it is very hard when you try to draw that line. The hospital chaplains have done a lot of work that's outside of their usual scope of responsibilities. I don't think in healthcare, in any organization, there's any individual that has been untouched by this. It is hard to draw a line around it. I know that wasn't much help, Senator Michel. I'm sorry about that.
Well, there's a lot of gray areas as to what we can spend the ARPA funds on, but I think it's very clear that the frontline workers in your hospital are for sure covered under what we can spend the funds on. And so I would encourage you, please, to try to help us come up with some numbers on that, because we're going to be going to work the first week of the session on working on how to spend the money, and that's not that far away.
Yeah.
And I know we'd like to.
We'll get some information back to you as well on that.
Thank you.
And that's muchly appreciated. And I know that they will appreciate it. Thank you for that.
I believe Senator Williams has another question.
Well, maybe a comment and a request as much. I'd like to maybe piggyback on what everybody's saying here. I want to commend you on trying to drill in a little deeper on trying to quantify this. We know we can't. We know there won't be enough money. It's like our teachers and our first responders. We won't have the funds to adequately cover it. We know they're underpaid. But of the presenters we've had here the last 2 weeks, you come in and you've gotten in the weeds more than anybody else. It's like, well, give us some money to help healthcare. Well, how? Y'all are definitely trying to ask the question of how, because the better we can define that and refine it as we go forward, I think we get a better utilization of the funds that we commit. And we as a committee, I hope I'm speaking for all of us, the more comfortable we feel with that, the more we're probably willing to try to recommend a different allocation for that. So please continue the efforts to try to define that. I know it's some ambiguity that will never make absolute, but the closer we get down that path to getting a specific recipe, I think the better. But thank you.
Thank you. We will.
Dr. Woodward, thank you for being here today. I have a few questions. You said that you would get us the number of all the dollars together.
Yes.
I know it's rattling around in your head. Give us an estimate today, if you would.
It is around 360 million. If you look at all of the things that I talked about, a cancer center, a building for the School of Dentistry, which includes a clinic and patient care area, a new building for the School of Nursing that allows us to expand, the infrastructure projects, the adolescent psych project. If you put all of that in a bucket, it's around 360 million. I didn't pull out my calculator, but on the ride over, I was looking at the list and I thought you might ask that question. So that's a rough number, but it's close.
Okay.
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of
It's
money.
a lot of money.
We have experienced a shortage of medical professionals. Don't know that we've had as big a dearth of doctors as we have the other professionals. How much, and I don't think we're going to solve that shortage in the next day or two, but we certainly need to solve it in the next couple of 3 years, or we're going to continue to be faced with $150 an hour nurses and things that just don't add up sometimes. So in your plan, how much do you see expending on educational space? And along with that question, how many professionals do you see entering the workforce because of that?
So in the plan that we're presenting or the request that we're making for the School of Nursing, their enrollment now is around 850 or something like that. It's close numbers. With a facility that is modern and designed for the current type of curriculum that nurses have, we could increase that class size by 25%. For the dental school, they take 40 students per year. And like I said, they are in a building that is very rigid and landlocked, and they could increase by 10 to 15%. With kind of the plans that we have, looking at the workforce and the needs across the state of Mississippi.
And each year, how many doctors are we producing from UMMC?
So our incoming class is 165 students per year. And we are, we've been doing that now for several years. And I think the senior class right now has around 145. I think the third year class is the first full 165 class. So we are still at a point where we're not quite graduating 165 this year in May. Like I said, it's around 145, and then the next year we'll be at that 165 number.
And you mentioned that all your students are Mississippians. When I was chair of IHL, I looked at that and it came to light that some of those have not spent that long a time in Mississippi. It's true, they are Mississippians, right, but they may have only been here a year or two to qualify. How many of our graduates from UMC are staying in Mississippi? I know residency programs has a lot to do with where they stay. Could you address that just for a moment?
So we do follow the rules for IHL that IHL has for establishing residency. So it's not a requirement that the students were born in Mississippi or have lived here all their life. Most of them are in that category, but there are some that are from Georgia or from Texas or wherever and came to college in Mississippi or came here for a master's program or something. We're here for a year, established residency, and I can't remember all the exact requirements, but there are, I think, 3 items that fall under the IHL requirements to establish Mississippi residency. And then so they are all Mississippi residents. Every once in a while, when I'm talking to some students and I say, so where are you from? And they say something like Georgia, I'll say, now, you have to remember, you are from Mississippi. You're a Mississippian now. But when you look at the retention rate at the end, it really does. You're exactly right. Where they do their residency makes a huge difference, because that is when they start to make those contacts in their field. If they're a pediatrician, if they're a radiologist, if they're studying to be a surgeon or whatever it is, that's when they start to make professional contacts in their field of specialty. So that is why we have been so focused over the years as we've grown the class size to also grow the residency programs. We didn't want to just have more senior medical students and more of them had to go out of state, despite their best interest. You know, mom, apple pie, we love Mississippi, despite their best intentions, I should say. If they go out of state for residency training, we will lose some of them who would have convinced you, as senior students, they were going to be back in Mississippi. So we want to have the opportunity for them to do their residency training in Mississippi if they want to do so. So when you look at the graduates of our school and the retention for to stay in the state, we are around 60, sometimes 55, but usually in the mid 60s up to 65% retention to end up practicing in Mississippi. And we use the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, data for this. They track graduates at the 10-year point. So that's kind of that, you've already gotten out of training, you've established a practice, and that's kind of where they get that information from. And it fluctuates a little bit. If you look at just the medical students, we are in the top 5 almost every year, always in the top 10, usually in the top 5 of states that retain their graduates to practice in their state. When you add the residents in the mix and look at all, then we're usually about number 7 or so in that ranking of all the states. And I think that ties to the fact that at least at the medical center, in our pool of residents, if you just put them all together, the pediatricians, the surgeons, emergency medicine, the internist, put them all in a bucket, most of the time it's about half and half, students from our school and students from other states. So when you mix that group together, the outcomes are just a little bit different. But I do think that does give us the opportunity for students that come here. I've known from my own personal experience. 15 years ago, I was the residency program director for my specialty at the medical center. And many times we would get residents who came from out of state and they were coming on a 3 or 4 year plan. And as soon as they finished, they were going back to where they came from. And now they have found out that usually the weather is good, the food is good, the people are nice, and they're down on the coast, taking care of patients right now. So we do get to import, I think, a few through those methods. But typically speaking, it's around 60% that we ultimately retain to practice in the state.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Woodward. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Senator Polk. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you, and we've made note of the items we owe back to you. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, as many people may not realize it yet, it's been kind of a quiet place, but Mississippi has 2 medical schools, and one, again, is located in Hattiesburg. So to present for William Carey University's College of Medicine, I believe we're going to start with Dr. Ben Burnett, and then we'll let him introduce the rest of his team that is here. Dr. Burnett, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Senator Polk, for this opportunity. And before I introduce our College of Medicine Dean, or before I give you an update on William Carey, let me certainly recognize the driving force behind William Carey University, who is in the room and elected not to speak today, but our president, Dr. Tommy King, is in the room today. And on a rare opportunity, former Baptist preacher and longtime administrator, he's decided not to speak today. So, but we are glad to have his presence. Before we begin, I'd like to thank you as the leadership of the state of Mississippi. As a lifelong Mississippian and as somebody who was born in the Delta, I appreciate what you're doing to look after the entire state. Also, as a former elected official, I know that you don't get a lot of thank yous. So thank you from William Carey University and from my household as well. The picture you see on the screen that you have on your presentation there, I was talking to Dr. Subarow the other day, and I have a pretty long history of people in my family who've graduated from Carey, although I'm a USM graduate. But my grandma graduated from William Carey in 1929. She was a teacher in the Clinton schools, and then went on and taught in other places. And I was telling Dr. Subarow the other day that, forgive my grammar, but this ain't my grandma's William Carey. We have withstood several fires, a hurricane in 2005, and most recently, as most of you know, an F4 tornado that ravaged the entire campus in 2017. And this is what we look like now. William Carey University has been around for a very long time, but now is a lot more than just a small Baptist college nestled in downtown in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And each one of these natural disasters that we have withstood, William Carey has just built back even better. Some more updates just real quickly before we get into the heart of our presentation. Some things you may or may not know about William Carey University. We're the oldest higher ed institution in South Mississippi, having our beginnings in 1892 in the town of Poplarville. We've had record enrollments back to back the last two falls and have gone over 5,600 students this past fall, or fall of 2021. And that's a doubling of enrollment during Dr. King's tenure as president. He is about to hit his 15th year mark as president of the university. We now have 3 campuses, not just Hattiesburg and Biloxi, but we've expanded our footprint outside of the state of Mississippi with a campus of healthcare only in Baton Rouge. And we've graduated over 1,000 students for the past 5 years. And the School of Education, where I was formerly the dean of the School of Education, I'm a 36-year career educator. The School of Education is defying the odds and is growing, where schools of education across the nation have declined by 35%, and that is paralleled in many institutions in Mississippi. But our School of Education now has over 1,800 students, and our undergraduate population, instead of declining by 35%, has increased by 240% in the last 3 years alone. This past summer, the School of Education graduated 521 graduates, making it one of the largest in the southern region for graduates in education. I also have the second largest school of music in the state, and we as well are forming partnerships with the community colleges. We don't try to out-recruit community colleges. We try to partner with them because we have so many transfer students who come to William Carey from our state community colleges. On to our healthcare facilities, you'll hear in detail about our College of Medicine in just a minute. But in addition to the College of Medicine, we're not just a medical school. We have a College of Health Science, and you'll see this picture here that was taken just a few months ago. We just opened this building in August of 2021. This is our Health Sciences expanded footprint of 75,000 square feet. In the College of Health Sciences, we have a nursing program, physical therapy, pharmacy, health information management, and as well as health administration education. This College of Health Sciences has over 1,000 students. That does not count our College of Medicine. This is just other healthcare related fields. Approximately 500 nursing students, and that goes from our RN program all the way. We have a PhD in nursing that draws students from all over the country in on weekends for our PhD in nursing. Our nursing board pass rate this past year was 100%. And our pharmacy school graduated our first class this past April. The pharmacy school is located at our Biloxi campus at the Tradition community. And we have about 150 students in the pharmacy school and graduated 46, and also received full accreditation for our pharmacy school. And physical therapy school is going well as health information management. And those programs are dumping graduates directly into the state of Mississippi. It's my pleasure and privilege right now to introduce a friend and a colleague from William Carey University, the College of Medicine Dean, Dr. Idolo Subarao. Dr. Subarao comes to Mississippi after a long career in healthcare. He graduated from Duquesne and also Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. He spent several years at the impressive Johns Hopkins, and then spent 6 years directing. He was the director of public health readiness at the American Medical Association in Chicago. Dr. Subarao has been at Carey for about 10 years as associate dean and now dean, and is now directing the doubling of the College of Medicine here at William Carey University. Dr. Idolo Subarao.
Thank you, Ben. Well, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee today. And I'd like to share with you a bold vision for primary care for Mississippi. And, I'd like to take you back to 2010. The College of Osteopathic Medicine was established in 2010. And when they established this, William Carey made a promise to Mississippi, a promise to address the access to care issue in primary care. And it was a bold initiative. It was something that was desperately needed. But we felt if we put a curriculum together that was principled on primary care education and included community engagement, compassionate, empathetic care, research, that we would start to formulate a student that would be a servant physician, one that would go out into rural and underserved communities and contribute. So this was our strategic plan, our sort of bold vision back in 2010. But before I get ahead of myself, oftentimes I'm asked, what is a DO? What is a doctor of osteopathic medicine? Well, a DO is a fully trained and licensed physician who is qualified to specialize in any area of medicine. They have full rights and practices. They go to school and take the same classes as our MD brethren. And, they go into the same residency programs and get board certified and do their licensure exams. The difference is more a philosophy of compassion and empathy it is a shared philosophy, but one that we sort of put at the forefront of what we're trying to do in terms of bedside care. And around 15% of our physicians in the country are DOs. So that's about 150,000 out of 1 million. Most DOs specialize in primary care. What is primary care? Family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics and gynecology, and psychiatry. And most specialize in those areas and go to rural and underserved areas to practice. It is what our profession is best at. And again, what's so important to us is we have a hustle and bustle society. We get on our cell phones, we don't look each other in the eye, and we think it's so important that as a physician in building trust with the patient, we look you in the eye, we hold you by the hand, and we provide compassionate and empathetic care at the bedside. What does this practically mean, though? What does this actually mean? What are we doing in our medical school? Well, of course, like any medical school, we do believe in lectures, and you'll see that in the middle. We do have lectures, but our students spend much more of their time in what I would describe as hands-on training. And what that means for us is our students become much more comfortable with the patient. And here we have, the picture below here in the middle shows one of our faculty members, a Dr. Ryan Anderson, who's a lieutenant colonel in the US Air Force, who actually just came back from Afghanistan. And you see him holding an ultrasound probe in his hand. For those who don't know, you always see doctors with stethoscopes, right? That's what you classically see. But honestly, in today's world and where we're going forward, the new stethoscope is the ultrasound probe. It can connect to your cell phone or to your smartphone, and you can get an image. Instead of just listening to your heart, we can actually visualize it. We can visualize it contracting. We can see where those abnormalities may be. And that could be powerfully important skill, particularly if you're in a rural and underserved area. And of course, we do provide, as a DO, we do look at the musculoskeletal system. So we'll look at folks. We spend extra time in the lab to look at the musculoskeletal system to see how that can be potentially a window to what might be going on. So, talking about access to primary care in Mississippi, I know I'm sharing with you statistics you're probably well known to you. The Mississippi ranks 49th regarding access to care and overall number of primary care physicians. Well, I'm telling you that in a short window of time, in the last 10 years, we're starting to see a small kindle of fire. We are starting to see something sort of begin in a very beautiful way. And what we've noticed in our graduating, we've graduated over 600 students now. When you look at our percentage of our class going into primary care, we are ranked in the top 5 in the nation by percentage of our students graduating and going into primary care residencies. That's among all medical schools, MD, DO. And for us, that says to us, this curriculum is working. What you're doing there, you're guiding them getting into primary care. Well, as we're starting to do that, we're starting to see that that's potentially a good solution we're now expanding our footprint in nursing, physical therapy, and pharmacy. As Dr. Burnett noted, we have over 500 nursing students right now at Cary. And we've developed a pharmacy program, physical therapy program. And similar to what Dr. Woodward has noted, the enrollments in these areas are at their highest. In fact, for our DO program, we have 4,000 applicants for our seats, for our 200 seats that we've got for this year. So as you're looking at this, you start to see this could really impact rural America. And what we're seeing, again, is that William Carey University College of Osteopathic Medicine is actually ranked second in the nation among MD schools, DO schools, among all US medical schools for placing our graduates into rural areas. Furthermore, with COVID and the stress of COVID, we know that underserved communities, underserved areas are in dire need of physician and healthcare providers, but particularly primary care physicians. And again, Cary is ranked 5th among all medical schools for placing our graduates into underserved areas. Now, all this is wonderful and laudable, but what's it cost? How much, you look at healthcare, everything escalates. You know that better than I do here at the Appropriations Committee. And what we're seeing is that we're providing an extremely cost-effective degree. Our degree does not cost the state of Mississippi any money. We have not taken any money from the state of Mississippi with regards to our medical school. Now, what we are seeing is that we're keeping our costs low. And with low costs, you're getting a high-quality education. We're considered top 5. We're ranked top 5 least expensive private school tuition for medical schools, again, by US News and World Report. And I can talk about a curriculum day in, day out. We've got a wonderful one where, this is just one among the accolades we've gotten. We're the first DO program to be part of the STAR Scholar Program, a STAR-sponsored institution. There are 5 of them in the nation. Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, University of Chicago School of Medicine, Dell School of Medicine in Texas, and University of Massachusetts School of Medicine, and us. We're the 5th school that's a STARS institution. We focus on value-based care. We're talking about cost here, cost in healthcare, value-based care, and we teach our students at the primary care level. How are you going to keep the cost low? Well, that ultrasound probe might be a good adjunct. Now, I've mentioned that that DOs can practice in any field of medicine, and we do see that among our Cary graduates. But in general, out of our 600 graduates that we have, 70% go into primary care. About a quarter go into family medicine, a quarter into internal medicine, 10% into pediatrics, 5% into obstetrics, and 5% into psychiatry. We also see, though, that 30% are specializing in other areas. We've got folks that are specializing in general surgery, about 14% in general surgery, 6% in emergency medicine. And then we have a smattering of folks going into dermatology, radiology, ophthalmology, neurology, you name it. We probably have a graduate that's gone into that field of medicine. But before I get much further, I want to echo what in the last conversation, the conversation that was had with Dr. Woodward about residency program. We think it's wonderful that y'all have continued to invest into primary care residencies in Mississippi. That is very, very important, community-based residency programs. And our students, that's what they want to do. If they can't do primary care in Mississippi, they're going to go somewhere else to do that primary care. And when I look at that, I look at areas like pediatrics, obstetrics, psychiatry. We have a wonderful new psychiatry program at Whitfield. Most of those residents are from Cary. And so the more we open these kinds of programs, the more our folks are definitely going to go there. So in a short window of time, we've kindled a fire. We've started something that is really beneficial for Mississippi. In the last 10 years, and just so, to graduate from a DO program is 4 years, the same as an MD, 4 years. And so we have 600 graduates in the last 10 years. But when you look at that, 70% of them are in primary care. And of those 600, 150 are here in Mississippi practicing. We've had about 60 or so go through the University of Mississippi Medical Center residency program system. And I know we've got a handful of folks that are faculty there at that esteemed institution. When we first started here in Mississippi, there were only about 100 practicing DOs. Today, there are 1,000. And the interest is booming. And what I call your attention to is the potential for transformation, particularly in primary care, where the rubber meets the road. When we look at our projections at Cary and where we're trying to go, you know, we're looking at a doubling and expansion of our class size, our ability to graduate up to 2,000 physicians. And if we maintain the statistics of the last 10 years and just not assume, and I will tell you, I believe they're very conservative and not really probably undercounting, but the truth is we would expect at a minimum to have 500 practicing Cary grads in Mississippi and probably a likely 2,500 or so DOs practicing in Mississippi. And I think that's where the transformation happens. You know, when I'm coming to you today to talk about our track record, what it is we've been doing over the past 10 years, and sharing with you that we haven't taken a dime. But I come to you now with a track record that shows we're doing something positive, something very special in primary care. We're doing something special for our communities in rural and underserved areas. There's something about our curriculum that's really working. And I believe if together, if Mississippi joins us in this endeavor, we'll be able to really tackle this primary care access issue. And we can do it together in a beautiful and wonderful way. We are coming to you today asking for funding for bricks and mortar. We are asking for $35 million to fund a one-time investment of bricks and mortar. This investment would allow us to have a world-class facility that would allow us to have the ability to have simulation rooms, ultrasound rooms, the latest in amenities in clinical education. And with that, we would focus on the needs of Mississippians. We would train thousands of physicians through this area. We would have certainly our DO program would come through there. But not only that, we would have a number of other clinicians in the area. For example, how many times have you gone to your physician and they've used an ultrasound probe? Probably not often. They're probably still using the stethoscope. But this kind of facility for the state, we could allow the opportunity for physicians in current practice, nurse practitioners that are out there, clinicians that are out there to come in and get that extra care. For us, this singular investment could transform Mississippi and have generational benefit. Again, $35 million for bricks and mortar, not for program development, not for salaries, not for tuition, not for anything else, for bricks and mortar as a one-time investment to do something that we believe would have generational benefit. And as noted, our focus would really be to train clinical practitioners to lift up healthcare in this state, to get everybody to focus on the latest interventions with regards to diabetes and hypertension and the needs of Mississippians, to focus on, allowing our schools by getting this kind of facility. For us, it allows us to double our overall healthcare sciences footprint. So while our medical school will double in our output and the overall number of clinicians will double, we would also allow our nursing program and all our other programs to expand and double and allow other programs to be built as well as needs of Mississippi require. So the other thing I wanted to note is that your investment in the Mississippi Office of Physician Workforce has been amazing. You've done this in the last 10 years, spent a lot of funding to build these community-based residency programs. But they need additional resourcing support. And this kind of facility would allow us to do that for all the programs in the state. In fact, even in our area with our Merit Health Hospital system and Forest General, we probably have close to 100 residents. And for them to have this type of training, I think will go a really, really long way. So the other thing I would just say is that it would be an inspiration to our area, an inspiration to our state. And it would help us cultivate our youth, cultivate our folks that are in our public school systems, to let them know that there are these opportunities here in Mississippi, that I can come here and stay home and train and become a great physician and go back to my community and practice. Ultimately, for us, it's about the betterment of Mississippi. It's about the betterment of healthcare and the quality of health in Mississippi. It's about helping our brothers and sisters, let them know that they deserve care from a physician and that they'll have a physician on their corner. And I appreciate all the work that University of Mississippi Medical Center is doing to solve this as well. And I think together we're doing something really wonderful. So as I come to you today, I ask for this singular investment. I think it will have a profound and transformational benefit. And I think what you're going to see is that this kind of singular investment, one-time investment, will allow us to do something that we could come back 5, 6 years from now and say, look at what we've done. Look at how far we've come, because we were able to make this singular investment that really had generational benefit. I appreciate you for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to present. I welcome you to Cary, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. DeBar. Any questions? Senator Williams?
What length of time will it take to construct this building?
Our architects have estimated about a 2-year time frame.
Thank you.
As I talked to Dr. Woodward about the necessity to get the numbers of medical professionals out there, I think UMMC has 800 in their nursing program. You've got 500 in your nursing program.
Yes.
Sounds like if we can get them out, our need for medical professionals will start declining, or we'll have more people out there serving areas than we have now. Is there anything that Mississippi needs to do to increase those numbers? I'm glad to hear that there are a lot of applications. That scared me also. So you are experiencing the rise in applications also?
Yes, we have. It is a phenomenon we're seeing now. I will tell you this year, we're seeing it come down a little bit. But it's not finished. We're only, early in cycle, but we are seeing, based on projections from the previous year, it's about the same. But for us, there's a dire need in Mississippi. We have to look at our healthcare. Not only do we have to look at the needs for healthcare, we have to look at our healthcare workforce, kind of the age of our healthcare workforce. We're a bit of an older workforce in the state. And that has to look in, really looking at attrition. For us, we believe that the needs of Mississippi are so great that we would like to have a problem of having an embarrassment of riches, but I do think in the next 10 years, there's ample room for all of us to kind of go forward and graduate some great doctors and physicians and nurses.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank y'all both for what you do. It's exciting. It's scary in a way, because as I grow older, I know I'm going to be using a lot more of y'all. Thank you very much. All right, that concludes our public hearings. We don't have any more schedule, not to say that at some point we will have to schedule 1 or 2, but I appreciate everyone who has been here and been attentive, and we will start working on our report. Thank you very much.